Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick here with you as always. Thanks for joining us for episode number 130. So, first off, I want to start this video by thanking everybody who has subscribed to the channel. We've now hit 1,000 subscribers, which is pretty sweet. It's been a long time in the making. It's about a little over 5 years now. So, just want to send a thank you out to everybody who has subscribed and to all those who will subscribe in the future, hopefully. So, anyway, what we got for you today is something, again, from Wild Turkey. Tend to go back to them a little bit, just because they create some good, just down-home, nothing fancy bourbon. So, what we've got today is the Rare Breed, and it's bottled at 116.8 proof, or 58.4% ABV. So that's barrel proof. Master distiller Jimmy Russell, which is interesting. I don't know. This may be an older bottling that I got. I just picked it up today. Obviously, we know that Eddie Russell is now the master distiller there. Jimmy Russell, of course, is still always there and always tasting all the batches that come out and is a force still behind the brand and in the industry. But that being said, with Jimmy's name on there, I'm wondering sort of how old this bottling is. There's no real date on there. I'm sure I could look up some of the codes that are on there, but who knows. But anyway, that's all we get. I didn't get the version. I've seen others out there that have the tin with it, which is also leading me to think that this might be an older bottling. But anyway, nothing special about it. There's nothing that says, like, oh, it's aged in, bourbon casks that have been seasoned with, Hershey's chocolate or some weird craziness like that. So, it's just your bare bones Wild Turkey at barrel proof, basically. So, let's go in and look at the color. Typical bourbon, coppery, honey, amber tones going on in there. Same thing we've grown to expect from classic bourbons over the years. And I was going for the nose. Nose is actually pretty subtle. You get a little bit of hint of vanilla, a little bit of peppery spice like cracked peppercorn. Some sweetness to it, a little bit of honey, hint of vanilla, but really sort of subdued, especially for being such a high proof. You would think that there's like a real kick in your face with the alcohol bite coming off. But there's not. Well, let's go in for the taste. Now, the first thing that you get, now, mind you, it being at barrel strength, and getting a little bit of a wallop from the alcohol in there, but not so much as other high-proof bourbons and other whiskeys that I've had in the past. For example, Jack Daniel's barrel proof, or even the rye at barrel strength. Those seem to have a little bit more of a kick to them. This one is actually pretty palatable where it's at. Yes, obviously there's a little bit of a bite, and there's no I'm going to try to hold back the kick, because it's obviously there. But it's well balanced, and that word smooth gets thrown around a lot, but in terms of this bourbon, it does come off smooth into the palate. It's just first you get that pepperiness sort of coats the tongue, and then it sort of settles into this honey, a little bit of citrus fruits coming in there, and definitely some deep, rich tobacco furniture / leather polish notes that sort of sit there in the back of the tongue and leave for a pretty good long aftertaste. With that sort of vanilla note that comes in the front is a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg that sort of coats the outer edges of the tongue, which is nice before it settles in. It was really quite delicious. And it's one that if you take a first few sips at right out of the bottle, you're not going to be impressed because you have to give it a little bit of time out of the bottle to give it a little bit of oxygen interaction in order to really get the flavor behind it. So I'm only going to add a little bit of water, just a couple of drops. And however you want to add water is fine. I just found this whiskey diluting dropper, which is kind of interesting. I found it a while ago. It's sort of got like a pot still on the top. Sort of Angel's Share Glass. It's kind of a strange thing to put in a website altogether. But I don't get endorsed, or I don't endorse them. I don't get paid by them or whatever. I just think it's interesting. But, just pour it out of a glass, use a spoon, something like that. But it helps to be a little bit more precise in your measurements. If you only want to put like a little bit of water at a time, or if you're in a hurry and you know exactly how much water, then by all means do whatever the heck you want. But yeah, with a little bit of water, it even masks the nose further than the subduedness of it at the beginning. Let's see what the taste is like. The interesting thing with even just a couple drops of water, it starts to transition from this like cinnamon and peppery vanilla note to one that's like a caramel corn. It's got like a carnival feel to it, if you will, of all those like really sugary, like sweet foods. Obviously the caramel corn that I mentioned, but also you get like this beautiful like coats of like not cotton candy per se, but a little hint of sweetness that sits there. It's probably this evolution of like the citrus fruits and like maybe orange, and pair that with these leathery tobacco notes, sort of just give a really interesting combination once you just add a bit of water. Not much though. And what further develops is some cherry in there. The cracked peppercorn that I got on the nose earlier is still there. Sort of sits in the back of the tongue. And the finish on this is really long. Obviously, the ABV on it helps it out. But it's really just nice to be able to sit back and sip and add a little bit of water, sort of, lengthen the mileage that you get out of the bottle, if you will. And I can imagine, summertime, it's nice and hot out, just throwing in a big ice cube or something like that. Sipping it slowly would be quite the way to go. Not way to go as in off the face of the earth, but a good idea if you're just sitting there on your front porch or your back porch or inside, whatever the hell you want to do. So, all in all, really almost journey-esque bourbon, from the sense that, like, you've got your standard wild turkey in there. You can distinguish it almost from any other bourbon that's out there. It's just got this, like, quintessential essence to it that you just know if you've had enough bourbon. And then having it at barrel strength is actually really quite profound, because you can stretch it out, like I was saying, with a little bit of water, and even a little bit more if you want to experiment with it, and sort of get, your whole value out of the bottle instead of just drinking it straight through like you might if it were 40 or 43% ABV, which is interesting. Also, the price point out here, again, in Washington, the taxes are astronomical on liquor sales. So this was about $62, which for a bourbon particularly of this strength, or I mean even just at this strength in general, is actually a pretty good deal, because you get to the higher proofs and they start charging like upwards of $120 for this stuff, especially when it gets to Scotch. So if you find that out there, you should definitely grab a bottle, because I'm sure it's going to be cheaper if I'm paying 60 something, you're probably going to be paying a little bit less than that if you're in some of our nicer, more nicely taxed states when it comes to alcohol. And also, just my pitch again, I've said it in other videos, if you find Old Granddad 114, that's the bottle to pick up, because you can probably still find it for about $25-$30. It's at the bottom shelf every single place that I've gone to. It's either been in some like dusty corner of the liquor store, or it's been tucked away in the bottom shelf, and they've got the whole, depth of the shelf full of them. So definitely pick them up if you see them. It's so delicious. But anyway, that's it for episode number 130. Thanks for joining us. As always, if you're going to drink responsibly, and we will see you next time.